Arahang Samma Sambuddho. 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 Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhidatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be heavy at heart. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhidatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sukhino wa khemino hontu. Sappa satta bhavantu sukhidatta. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. Well and secure may all beings be. May all beings be happy at heart. Okay, sit comfortably with your back straight. Back straight, head straight, body relaxed. Mind relaxed, yet alert. If the mind is not caught up in thoughts, feelings, perceptions, imagination, what can it be aware of happening right now? remember the other anchor principle. Have the right attitude towards thoughts, perceptions, and feelings. Like the sounds around you and like the weather, they are all products of causes and conditions. No need to complain, no need to push them away, don't ignore them, don't follow them. Acknowledge them, let them go, gently let them go and come back to anchor yourself to the senses. Especially the body sense, hearing, seeing. Try to stay composed and grounded, especially when you listen to this first part of tonight's talk, which is about the jhanas. And I want you to look back at your own experience, and perhaps you might have experienced the jhanas in the course of your practice. A jhana is supposed to be a special meditative state of composure, and it is not defined by the object that the mind is attending to, but rather it is defined according to the qualities of the mind that are present in that meditative state. In the first jhana, there are 6 qualities. The first one is that the mind is secluded from desires for the pleasures of the senses. You may be aware of what's happening with the senses, you may be aware of the objects, but there is no desire for them. That's the first quality. The second quality is that the mind is secluded from unwholesome mental states, which means to say there are no attachment, hate or aversion or delusion in the mind. When that happens, the mind is aware. The third quality is that there is some initial thinking, maybe thinking about the practice, about how to practice open awareness. Not thoughts about desires of the senses, not thoughts pertaining to desire for pleasures of the senses, but maybe thoughts about practice. How do you put in the effort? How do you pay attention? Or how you direct your attention towards the objects that are appearing in your field of awareness. That can be in the form of initial application, applying your mind to the practice. The fourth quality is that there can also be sustained application, or thinking a bit more of how to maintain that composure. The fifth quality is that there is joy. There is a deep interest in what you're doing. And the sixth quality is that there is comfort and happiness. Check for yourself. Have you experienced this in the course of your practice? Maybe not so long, maybe for a short span of time. There might be occasions where you don't have any sense desires, no unwholesome states of mind, and yet there is some thought about how to practice and how to sustain the practice. And there's also interest and joy and happiness in the practice, not boredom. That is the first jhana, the first meditative state. In the second meditative state, the initial and sustained application or the thinking and discursive thinking is dropped. You don't have to think about how to practice anymore. It comes naturally. The mind automatically becomes aware of whatever appears in its field of awareness effortlessly. The first two qualities that are achieved in the first jhana, which is seclusion from desire for sensual pleasures and seclusion from unwholesome states, is maintained. From the first jhana onwards until the fourth is no longer there. But in the second jhana, what is dropped is vitakka vichara, initial thinking or sustained thinking. Thinking about practice, not about things of the world. Even those two are absent. In terms of application of the mind, there is no need to put in effort to be mindful. It is like automatic, on auto mode. The mind is aware of things arising, whatever happens at the six sense doors. And because of that, there is internal clarity of mind. The mind becomes very clear, and it becomes one. There is also oneness of mind. And there is the joy and happiness born of composure. That's another quality. In the first jhana, the joy and happiness is born out of seclusion. Seclusion from desires for pleasures of the senses, and seclusion from unwholesome mental states. In the second jhana, the joy and happiness is born out of composure. The mind becomes composed, more composed than the first jhana. So that is the second jhana. That is the true noble silence. There's no more internal chatter, no thinking at all, no thinking about worldly matters, no thinking even about practice. There's just on autopilot and seeing things appearing at the senses. If you had gone further, you might have gone to the third jhana. In the third jhana, there is no more joy. Joy becomes something not as calm and composed. So it's something like it's a bit agitative. So it's dropped. And that mind becomes equanimous. It no longer clings or attaches itself to the joy of the two experiences. The joy born of seclusion from unwholesome mental states and from the sense, from desire for the sense pleasures, or the joy that arises out of composure. There's no more attachment to it. This is very sweet joy, and that's where the mind can get very, very attached. You go beyond that, no attachment to joy. So now the mind becomes very equanimous. And because of that equanimity, and the joy is gone, there is also no more physical happiness, but there is mental happiness. And also, mindfulness and full awareness becomes even more prominent. Although there's already mindfulness and full awareness right from the start, in the third jhana it becomes most prominent. There is mindfulness because the mind is on guard. On guard against what? Against attachment to joy. Because if it's not on guard, the mind will automatically crave for the joy of the second jhana and fall back to the second jhana. Sati at that time is really, really on its toes. Then there's full awareness, fully aware of what's happening. No more bodily happiness, but there's mental happiness. I don't know whether I should go on, whether it's beyond your reach. In the fourth jhana, there is no more even mental happiness. That also has been dropped. And there's just a neutral feeling. Neither happy, nor unhappy, neither pleasant, nor unpleasant. And because of that neutral feeling, the equanimity becomes even stronger. And because of that equanimity, the mindfulness becomes strongest than ever. So now the mindfulness has been purified through equanimity. That is the fourth jhana. So in the fourth jhana, absolutely no more thoughts, no more effort, absolutely effortless. Things are just going and the mind is just seeing things coming and going. But this is just pure jhana, no investigation. This is just composure. Some people have this idea that jhana can only be attained or experienced when one does focused awareness. Through the interviews, I think that some of you may have experienced this even though you are doing open awareness. But you judge for yourself. I'm not going to be accused of people saying, hey, Bhante Aggacitta declared that I got the first jhana or second jhana. You go and make your own judgment. I just give you the criteria and you find out for yourself what you have or what you didn't get. So much for the jhanas. Let's do a bit of review of what we have done while we were here. The most important thing is the 4 R's. Can you remember? If you don't have the 4 R's, everything else is gone. You cannot remember anything. You cannot practice. The 4 R's of sati or mindfulness. The first one is to remember instructions. Remember the Dhamma, the Dhamma talks, the instructions, the doctrine, while you are listening to them. Secondly is to recollect what you have heard. Not just go in one ear and come out the other ear. Thirdly is to remind yourself to put all these things that you have heard and you can recollect into practice. And perhaps most importantly is to look back at what had just happened, especially in your mind. How is the mind reacting? How is the mind responding to what appears at its field of awareness? I always been emphasizing that this practice of open awareness is more subject-oriented than object-oriented. You're not so interested in what's happening outside. That's just a means to an end. It's just to compose your mind and give you a chance to have an overview of what things are going on around you. And when the mind is composed enough, you start to investigate, to see how things relate to one another. That's where the real wisdom comes. The composure, the peace of mind, the stillness is just a holiday. After your holiday, you get rejuvenated, you got back to work. Okay? But many of us need that because we have been working too hard. So we need a holiday. We need to still the mind so that we can see clearly. Before that, we were too busy, caught up in our ideas and our prejudices, our biases, our emotions. We can't see clearly. So you need to still the mind, and when the mind is composed, then things appear very clearly to you. You see how things relate to one another, and all the data that you have collected in the past can be pieced up together by wisdom, and it can give you a wise answer. Another thing that we talked about is the 3 features of the mind. Remember the 5-6-1 principle? 5 senses can only take a specific present object that is relevant to the sense base. That's the 5 senses. The 6th sense, the mind, can take objects of the present, the past, imagination, and beyond. And it can take any of the objects of the 5 senses, whereas each of the 5 senses can only take its own specific object. The mind can take all of them, plus other things, concepts, imagination, fantasies, and even nibbana. Then, how do we still the mind? The other anchor principle. Don't forget that. First one is have the right attitude, accept thoughts, perceptions, feelings as conditioned phenomena. Don't push them away, don't ignore them, don't follow them, but rather acknowledge them and anchor yourself to the 5 senses. So you need also sati to be able to do that, to remind yourself about this other anchor principle and to put it into practice. When sati is doing a good job, it's always being reminded to look back at what's happening, how the mind is reacting, how the mind is responding to what it appears in its field of awareness. Then you'll be able to catch your thoughts. You'll be able to catch your intentions, the first thoughts, the first urges that arise. When you catch them, then you can process them according to the bar test. If you are not fast enough to catch these initial urges and intentions, before you know it, you're already saying something which you would regret later, or do something that you'll regret later. Or even wasting your time pursuing a thought that is unproductive or unwholesome. So it's very, very important to be able to catch that first intention. You must be on your toes all the time, always look back. It's not so much what's happening outside, but what's happening inside. What's happening outside is just, as I said, a means to anchor your mind, to give you stillness, to bring about composure. Once it's achieved, look back. Look back. How's the mind reacting? How's the mind feeling? And when I say reaction, I don't only refer to negative reactions. I'm also referring to neutral reactions like recognizing something. I'm also referring to, especially, to how ideas arise in your mind. Judgments arise in your mind. Opinions, how opinions are formed. Opinions, views, beliefs, expectations. These are the major culprits for suffering. Because if you cling on to them and they are not accurate or they are not true, then you're looking for trouble. So that's why if you're always on your guard, looking back at what's happening to the mind, how these ideas and opinions and beliefs arise and influence the way you speak, the way you relate to people, then you can be on your guard. Don't be too assertive. Be cautious. This is only an assumption. This is only a belief. It's based on certain facts that I have accumulated, and it may not be complete. When one is able to understand how all these ideas, opinions, beliefs, expectations, hopes, and so forth influence our thought process, then there's a very, very big first step to prevent suffering, to cut down on suffering. So what do? When we look back and we're able to catch it, then we apply the bar test. So I've been telling you about the bar test in relation to the retreat situation. Now we have to tweak it a little when we go out to the world. Well, when you say the first one, B stands for beneficial. Beneficial can be seen from various value systems. When you, in the world, it may be beneficial to your company because it's going to make a lot of profit. It may be beneficial to you as a person. It may be beneficial to you as the head of a family, or an employee, or an employer. Sometimes these may even conflict. For us Buddhists, of course, the most basic of all criteria is whether it's going to be wholesome or unwholesome. Remember right livelihood? If it's harmful, it harms others, although it brings a lot of profit to you and your company, but it is harmful to others and also harmful to you in the sense that you're creating bad karma. Don't pursue it. Don't follow it. Drop it. That's what you have to, that's the sort of criteria that you have to use when you go back to the world. Thought arises in you, an idea, you have to look at it in relation to your role that you're playing, in relation to the particular goal that you are striving for. Of course, for Buddhists, the ultimate goal is to be free from suffering, but that's an ideal. Back in the world, you're trying to earn a living, you're trying to survive in the world, you have subsidiary goals. And so you have to adjust according to these goals. Is it beneficial to the goal that I'm heading for right now? And secondly, appropriate actually has a wide coverage, a wide range. It could be appropriate in terms of timing, appropriate in terms of mood, in terms of the receptivity of that person, in terms of the way you express yourself. Not only that, if you are a business person, you want to embark on a business project, you have to look at the circumstances in the environment, isn't it? The current financial circumstances, the market that you are targeting. This is also comes under appropriateness. This bar test applies to initial intentions that are connected with planning, with speech, and with action. Yeah, you start to plan first, and then you start to verbalize it, and then you put it into action, right? You have to watch all this all the time. And this is quite in accordance with Buddha's advice to his son, Rahula. And this is given in the simile of a mirror. There were no mirrors during the Buddha's time, but they looked at their reflection in a plate of water. So the Buddha asked him, what is the plate of water for? And Rahula, his son, said, it's for looking at one's reflection. The Buddha said, in the same way, Rahula, you should always reflect before, during, and after you do, say, or think. Because before you do something, you already reflected and you thought that it passed the bar test. But while you are doing, things may change. Circumstances may change, and you have to adjust your course, adjust your actions, and that time, you might not pass the bar test. Or you get carried away and you did something which was unbeneficial or harmful, and at the end of it, you suddenly realize that, oh, I shouldn't have done it. Before, during, and after, there should always be reflection. So the Buddha says you have to reflect whether it's beneficial to oneself and to others. Only if it is, then you do it. And while doing, you find that it's not, stop. And after you have done it, too late. But then make a resolution. Next time, don't do. This is quite in accordance with what the Buddha advised his son Rahula. Another thing that is quite relevant to this is one sutta called Vaca Sutta. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 5, Sutta number 198. It's called Vaca Sutta. Let me read to you. Bhikkhus possessing 5 factors, speech is well spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach by the wise. What 5? It is spoken at the proper time. Number 1, timely. And secondly, what is said is true. Thirdly, it is spoken gently. Fourthly, what is said is beneficial. And fifthly, it is spoken with a mind of loving kindness. So this fits in with our bar test also, right? There is here whether it's beneficial or not. So you speak only what is beneficial, and whether what you say is true or not, that actually comes under the last R, realistic, whether it's real or not. Proper time, gently, and with loving kindness, all this comes under appropriate. Do you say it at the right time, and you say it gently, not rudely, and also you say it with loving kindness, not out of a grudge, or because you want to get your own back at somebody. As I was saying last night, when we are doing talking meditation, we try to save about 40% of our attention on ourselves and the other 60% on the other person. This is very good because it gives you a chance to step back and have an overview rather than getting caught up in what the other person is saying and what you are trying to retort or reply or plan to say. So you can actually listen carefully to where the other person is coming from without prejudices. If you can see your prejudices and judgments arise, also be aware of them. Be aware of how they are formed and that they are not absolute but tentative. And then you can also see how receptive the person is to what you're going to say. And if you really understand where he's coming from, then you can speak in such a way that he can understand you. You can speak in his terms. Most people don't actually listen. They just want to talk. They just want to express what they have to say. They don't listen to what the other party says. So that's why there's a lot of conflict. Because both parties only want to say what they want. They're not interested in what the other party says. Now we come to relevance. Relevance also has to be taken in relation to the role that you are playing. As lay people, you have many roles to play. You have the role of a parent, the role of a spouse, the role of a boss or an employee, the role of a client, the role of a patient, the role of a customer. Different roles to play. And you have to apply this bar test according to the role you are playing at that point of time. Is it relevant to the role that I'm playing? If you have a particular job to do, if you want to criticize or want to say something to a fellow colleague, then you have to ask yourself, is it part of my job? Or am I trying to be kaypoh? That's one thing, whether it's relevant to your job. And secondly, say pass is relevant. But you have to also see whether the other person is receptive. If it's not a receptive person, no point wasting your time and effort. You're going to cause more animosity. So you have to use your discretion. When your mind is composed and clear, you will be able to give an overview. You will see everything as give you an overview of the situation, and you will know what to do. The key is composure of mind. When the mind is composed, then wisdom can arise. The proximate cause for composure is sati, mindfulness. And the proximate cause for wisdom is composure. Right? So they are very interrelated. You need to have sati or mindfulness before you can have composure, and when you have composure, before wisdom can arise. Another aspect of relevance is perseverance. Whether you persevere in the role that you are playing. You have a job responsibility, and are you persistent in doing it, not giving up at the slightest obstacles? Being single-minded about it? This is also another aspect of relevance. Finally, we come to the last R, which is realistic. And we can look at it from two aspects. One is whether it is factual, whether it is true and factual, or is it just a suspicion, is it just an assumption? If it's just a suspicion, be careful. Don't simply act on it, because you might offend somebody. Particularly this thing about being suspicious about the other person's behavior or conduct happens very often among married people. When you start to say something out of suspicion which is not verified, then there's a cause for a big quarrel. So be careful. And watch your mind. If it's suspicion, restrain yourself first. Go and find out. Verify first before you make any statements. Next, the other aspect of being realistic is whether it is practical or not. Is it practical? Is it feasible? Is it doable? You may have a fantastic plan, a fantastic idea, but if it's not doable, why waste your time? And to know whether it's practical or feasible or doable, you also need to have a wide overview of the situation. So you also need to have composure, to have a wide overview of the things before you can make a decision. When an idea arises in you, you have to put it to the bar test in this way. It may be a fantastic idea, but is it really going to work? You get it? This bar test is quite flexible. It can be used in the spiritual context, and it can also be used in the worldly sense, if you know how to tweak the value system according to the role that you are playing. Coming back to the spiritual path, I was talking about the Four Noble Truths for the last few nights, and I also encouraged you to apply the Four Noble Truths in your daily life. Not just something theoretical, but try to verify it. Is it really true? Every time you suffer, in whichever way, look into its cause. I don't know which teacher, whether it's Long Po Cha, who said that if you're suffering, then you're clinging on to something. Look for what you're clinging to, what you're attached to. Most of the time, it's because you're attached to an unrealistic expectation, or hopes, or aspiration, or desire, or belief, or idea. So if you hold on to such things, then you're looking for trouble. But most people don't realize that. But if you practice sati sampajanya, mindfulness and full awareness, you're always looking back at the mind, how the mind relates, how the mind is feeling, how the mind is reacting, and you try to look into the causes and conditions, this becomes very, very clear to you. For lay people who are trying to walk the spiritual path, the noble, eightfold path to liberation, there's always a big conflict. Because back in the world, you're always chasing after material things to get good salary, to get good profits, so that it gives you the power to buy things to satisfy your desire, including buying security. and comfort of various sorts. How can you stop this? Especially when you have a family, you have your obligations. You have to be realistic. There has to be a limit to the desires that you want to pursue. Be honest with yourself. Do you really need so much? And if you really need to do something out of desire to get more income, then ask yourself, what's the payoff? Because desire is a cause of suffering. Once you embark on this, in order to satisfy your desire, this is what you're going to go through. Is it worth it? If it's not worth it, don't do. If you don't really need it. If you really need it, can't be helped, you have to go to suffering. This is part of life. And that's why the Buddha says it's suffering. You cannot do without desire, but try to limit your desire so that you suffer less. Another thing is that it's not so wise to just think that, you cannot apply the same set of values that you have in a retreat when you go back home. You cannot be walking around like a zombie, restrained, cannot look here, cannot look there. You don't eat this, don't eat that, don't buy this, don't buy that, right? You can't do that. You have a different set of values. And so you have to apply different set of values when you are in different situations. So be flexible. Regarding the desires, each of us have our own desires for certain things. Depending on individuals. Different people have got different interests. It could be desires of the senses. Some people like music. Some people like videos and movies. Some people are gourmets. They like to eat a lot, different food, and so forth. Instead of just suppressing yourself not to do it because you say, I'm a Buddhist, I'm practicing a Noble Eightfold Path, I must have right thought, which is renunciation, renounce all these things. You're forcing yourself to do so. There's no wisdom, no point. Right? If you can afford it, go and gratify yourself. As long as you don't break your precept, you don't cause harm to other people. But do it with mindfulness. Look at the gratification that you get. And look at how long the gratification lasts. And look also at the drawbacks. How much suffering did you have to go through to get that few moments of gratification? Every time it happens, look at it again and again and again and again. Then one day you will find that it's not worth it. It's not worth it. How do I stop it? Then you will see that the motivating force is actually desire. There's a desire for this gratification because it's pleasurable. And what is the drawback? The drawback is not only the amount of suffering you have to go through in order to get these few moments of gratification, but also that this gratification is impermanent. It arises and passes away. Doesn't last long. Few moments of gratification, you have to work like mad to get it. Few moments of gratification, you have to suffer like mad to sustain a relationship. Is it worth it? You have to weigh it yourself. No one can tell you. You yourself knows best. But if you want to make a decision, compose your mind first. Compose your mind, ask the question, let wisdom decide for you. This is very important, which I talked about last retreat. Gratification, drawbacks, and escape. Look at this. Every time you have your desires and you don't break your precept, you can afford it, go ahead. Do it with mindfulness and see how much it's really worth it. Before I became a monk, I was a lay person. I was a very active person. I played the guitar. I love music. I composed my own music. I composed my own songs. I was a great dancer. Both in ballroom dance, freestyle dancing. But then I was also tried out acting in drama. And I went through all this with mindfulness and I found that it's not worth it. Fleeting pleasures, they don't last. It can go a long way. Even before I became a monk, I was always contemplating on the Four Noble Truths, Contemplating in the sense of actually verifying it in my own practice, in my own experience. We have to have the discretion to be able to know when we apply the standards in a retreat. Our standards in a retreat and our standards in our daily life is different. And another thing is, don't be in a hurry to get enlightened. Because you can't hurry. It's all due to cause and condition. Even if you want and the causes and conditions are not there, you cannot get it. Be patient. So that's why I advise people, you want to make aspiration for speedy enlightenment, be wise and say, by the power of these merits, may I attain Nibbana swiftly and comfortably. I can tell you my own experience. When I was a young monk, and I was staying alone in the forest for about 10 over years, I made an aspiration to become an arahant in this very life. 3 times a day. And I went through lots of suffering. Very inexplicable suffering. Somehow there will be misunderstanding which you can never undo. And people will do all sorts of bad things to me, even though I was a monk. Even people will poison my food, and I go for alms round, will cook things that make me unhealthy. And there were natives there who will do black magic on me. At that time, I didn't know anything about this process of having to repay all your karmic debts before you exit. I just was very determined. Then, after 10 years over of suffering in the forest, I came out and I started SBS. That was in 2000. And the architect that we got, who volunteered her services to design this place, was practicing what we call pranic healing and arhatic yoga. Master Chua is also a strange character. Chua Kok Sui. He is Filipino, Christian, of Chinese origin, and he teaches Tibetan Buddhism. So I was attending his Arhatic Yoga course, which actually is something like Dzogchen, but with chakras and all that stuff. You have to open up your chakras and do open awareness in your style. And he told us in one of his talks about this thing, that if you on the spiritual path and you're very determined to make very fast progress, be prepared for a lot of suffering. It says a lot of practitioners, because they are in a hurry to progress, then they meet up with a lot of suffering, physical as well as emotional, psychological, relationship problems. So it says, be careful. If you want to make an aspiration, be prepared. Are you strong enough to undergo all this suffering, to bear with all suffering and yet keep on practicing? That was really something new for me. I came to know about this through this teacher, Master Chua Kok Sui. He has really passed away. Since then, I have modified my aspiration. I attained Nibbana swiftly and smoothly. And since then, my life has been very smooth. I don't know how swift it's going to be, but it's been smooth. Another thing that I want to encourage you is not to be so goal-oriented. Don't think so much of wanting to be a Sotapanna, getting Nibbana within a certain frame of time. You got no control. It's all anatta. It's all causes and conditions. You just do your job, have compassion for your body and your mind, and let it unfold by itself. No point. It's beyond your control. It's anatta. When you begin to see within yourself that everything is due to cause and conditioning, how can you be so foolish as to make something within a certain frame of time? It's impossible. I would instead suggest that you check your progress according to the following markers. The whole purpose of Buddhist practice is the purification of the mind. And we talk about Nibbana, it's not that experience of Nibbana that is important. That experience of Nibbana may be extraordinary, but for the lower stages of enlightenment, it is just a moment. That's all. And you can't even repeat it. That's according to the suttas. The commentaries say you can repeat it, but the suttas don't say that. Only for the finish. But it's not that experience itself that is important. It is the consequences of that experience. And the consequences of the experience are the eradication of the fetters that bind you to birth and death, samsara. In order to have that glimpse of Nibbana that brings about such drastic or far-reaching consequences, you have to clean up the mind. It's a purification process. When the mind is sufficiently purified and wisdom arises, then you get a glimpse of Nibbana. And that experience is able to eradicate these fetters. I'm not going to go through the 10 fetters. I'm just going to say generally that if you want to check whether you're making progress or not, it's very simple. Look within yourself. Is there a reduction of unwholesome mental states of greed, hatred, delusion, jealousy, envy, conceit, attachment to views and opinions and traditions and teachings? Is there a reduction in the frequency and the intensity of these unwholesome states? So you check yourself. Secondly, is there an increase in wholesome states? That you become more detached, not attached to views and opinions and expectations and hopes and so forth. You have less desires. You don't crave so much, you don't shop so much, you don't buy unnecessary things, and less hatred, less jealousy, less bad-tempered, more patient, more forgiving. These are the positive markers that you can look for. In short, there is a change of character for the better. On the other hand, if you go in and out of retreat and you come back and you're getting worse, there's something wrong somewhere. And there are many yogis who go in and out of retreat, they come back, they become even more conceited. Oh, I can sit 3 hours, I can see the pain and just go like that. I had this fantastic experience. That's all conceit. Whatever fantastic experience you have in the retreat, mostly cannot be repeated. The more you try to repeat it, the more suffering you get. Don't cling on to any experience, no matter how fantastic or how extraordinary or how joyful it may be. It's gone, it's come and it's gone. Don't think about it, finish. Move on. The most important thing is, what does the experience do to you? Has your greed, hatred and delusion and all these negative mental states dropped? Are you more forgiving, more accepting, more understanding, more detached? That is your job. You just look back at yourself and you are the best person to know. Another thing is, how does this happen? When you begin to see causality, you begin to see how the mind works, it's due to causes and conditions. Then it's very easy, right? You know that your mind works that way. Everybody's minds also work that way. I didn't want this thought, it just came of itself. Even the defiled thoughts don't belong to you. Even the good thoughts don't belong to you, because they are all due to causes and conditions. There's no reason for you to be judgmental on other people, because they are in the same boat. All of us are in the same boat. It's just a matter of intensity. People are ignorant because they don't know about the Buddha Dhamma, they don't know how to look into their own minds. Instead of being angry at them, instead of being judgmental, we should be compassionate. Oh, these poor people, these poor ignorant people, they don't know. I know, so I should forgive. I forgive myself and I forgive others. When you see causality continually in your life, again and again and again, in all aspects of our life, not just once a year in a retreat, then life becomes very smooth. Very easy. You're able to forgive and let go. And very, very naturally, the 4 Brahma Viharas can flow from you. You can have loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity when you can't do anything. It's all due to causes and conditions. When you see causes and conditions, and then you see how you try to put the Four Noble Truths into practice, verify that in your daily life, then you see that lots of your suffering, your mind-rooted suffering, are caused by desire, attachment, craving, wanting. So the more you see it, then the more you understand, then the less desires you have. You learn from your experience. You have less desires, less suffering. Then less desires, more contentment. More contentment, more happiness. That's what everybody is looking for, isn't it? Everyone is looking for happiness, but they think that happiness can be bought with wealth and power. That's not true. Even the wealthiest people, the most powerful people, are not happy. They may think that they are happy, but actually there's a lot of agitation and unhappiness in them. Even billionaires kill themselves. When all these things happen, you see causality, your desires drop, you don't shop so much, you become more introverted, less sociable, then don't be surprised if your friends begin to say that you are weird. Because the Buddha said very clearly, the way to Nibbana is one, the way of the world is another. And those who are on this shore are the many, and those who cross over the other shore are the small handful. Of course you are weird. It's weird to become a monk. It's abnormal to become a monk. The majority of people are not monks. The majority of people don't practice celibacy. We are abnormal people. But it's okay. So you will be branded weird because you have changed. You have changed because you don't want to associate with these people that they're all cronies anymore, because you talk about all these worldly things which do not conduce to spiritual progress. Automatically you will try to avoid them. But of course, your relatives, it's not so easy because you still have this obligation. So you have to practice patience and consideration. You may start talking things that you are not interested in, so you don't have to brush them aside. You can just lend an ear. Hearing is just hearing. Seeing is just seeing. Not in smile. I don't have to add in the extra spices. I think that's about all. I don't want to overload you with too much information before we call it a night. Any questions? Anything I said that's not clear enough? Yes.
You mentioned about wisdom. Wisdom is come from the pieces of memory. Pieces of memory, then they join together, then become a vision. Is this wisdom, it's a new piece of information, or actually is the information already been singled in the sanya there already?
He's an IT guy, so he's using all IT terminology. He's asking whether wisdom is bits and pieces here and there, collected from the past, and it's already synced inside the mind. When all these are collected together, then they will piece together in one big piece and it arises. Is it? It's not a bad analogy. It's all due to causes and conditions. In a way, the mind works like a hard disk. It's like virtual memory. All these are collected not only in this life, in past lives. It's already there. It's been collecting and accumulating. That's why the Buddha says, how fast you can progress in the spiritual path depends on your spiritual faculties. And your spiritual faculties come with you from the past. If you start off with something, a very, very old version, then you got to upgrade it before you can make progress. If you already come with a new version, no problem. All the things can download very easily. Okay. Alright, anyone else? Yes.
Just now you say that the goal of this practice is liberation.
The ultimate goal of this practice is Nibbana, right? Then?
From my understanding, the Buddha also says, I only teach one thing, and that is the ending of suffering, cessation of suffering in the here and now. So wouldn't the goal be the immediate end of suffering, how to end suffering here and now? The thing long term.
The question is, Judy asked me whether I said that the ultimate goal of this practice is Nibbana. And I said yes. Then she said that she thought that the Buddha said that he only taught one thing, which is suffering and the end of suffering in this very life. Correct? In here and now. Here and now means in this very life. That's the English translation of the Pali word. And so she asked whether it should be here and now, right now, rather than projecting it into the future lifetimes. I've yet to come across such a sutta, so can you please give me the reference? Because I know that the Buddha said, I teach only one thing, suffering and the end of suffering. But there's no such thing as in the here and now. That's a new sutta. Haven't heard it yet. So if you give me the reference, I'll be very happy. Okay, anyone else? Yes.
On this payback of karma, you're saying, to be enlightened. I've also listened to some Dhamma talks before. And the monk was saying that if a person attains Sri Mentor, it's all his bad karma is sort of eliminated because the Sakaya Ditti is no more there.
The question is, I talked about paying back bad karma, karmic debts. And Peter said that he has heard a monk said that when one becomes a Sotapan, a stream enterer, then all his bad past karma will be obligated because he has eradicated Sakaya Ditti, which is wrong view of a self. This is not true. That's not what the suttas say. The suttas say that the stream enterer is incapable of taking rebirth in the lower realms. Full stop. Which means to say that whatever bad karma he has done in the past that is able to generate rebirth in the lower realm, that is eradicated. Not any other karma. And a particular bad karma that you did can give result as a rebirth generating karma, or it can give result in the present lifetime, in the course of existence, like giving you aches and pains or circumstances in such a way that you'll be murdered or killed. This is still there. This has to be repaid. But it won't generate rebirth in the lower realm. Even the Buddha himself had to pay back his bad karma, and Asma Sariputta had to pay back his bad karma. Asma Moggallana had to pay back his bad karma. Asma Angulimala had to pay back his bad karma.
I mean, some of it.
Well, all of it. The Buddha says specifically in one sutta that I do not say that there can be an ending of suffering without experiencing the result of your past karma. You want to know more? Attend my sutta workshop. Okay, I think enough for today.